What's up, Inspired Vision students, plus anybody I might be catching on YouTube? We are now on day 17 of our 19-day Accelerated Algebra I course. We are getting ready for our STAAR test by doing the 2015 STAAR EOC questions 16 through 28 today. So there's a possibility of 54 questions on the test. They are coming out of these reporting categories 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we just spent the last 15 days preparing for these categories, and then we're spending the next 4 days doing STAAR release questions, and we're now on day 17. So we have 2 more days to go. So if you haven't caught the previous videos, the previous lessons, or you're struggling with them, I will refer back to these lessons during the questions that we're doing today. Okay, so if you haven't already, get the STAAR test in front of you. You can download it from this link or by going to Google and search 2015 STAAR Algebra I release test. Either way, and this link is posted on the YouTube channel. Here is question number 16. Now this is how it's going to work. Because we're doing 13 questions today, I can only spend about 2 minutes per question, otherwise the video will go too long. So I'm going to show you the question, then I'm going to put this pause button on the screen where I need you to pause and try to work it out without any hints. But if you are needing hints, then I'll offer hints like this. This concept is coming from day 14, and we talked about domain and range for this question. Now what I'm going to do next is show you some hints. So if you don't want to see them, then make sure you pause. My hint is that range is talking about the y-axis. So you're going to look from the bottom of the function to the top of the function. Make sure you're only looking at the y-axis numbers. Okay, pause, get an answer, because I'm covering the answer next. Okay, here we go. Here's the answer. The range is from -3, so the bottom part of the function would hit the -3 axis if you were to draw an imaginary line to -3, and it goes all the way to +4 at the top of the graph. So the answer is G. Okay, here comes number 17. Pause the video, make sure you read it over. This concept is from day 14. Alright, here come the hints. It is talking about the attributes of quadratics. You actually don't have to solve at all in this question. Alright, here's the first hint. You will want to draw a graph. It's actually talking about 2 graphs, a quadratic function f and g. You want to try to draw both of them, but before you draw both of them, you need to plot these 2 points. So sketch out a really quick graph. It doesn't have to, or graph doesn't have to be anything perfect, but definitely put the point 3, 2 on it and 7, 2 on it. And then for your second hint, you're going to want to draw one quadratic, which is a parabola, going upwards through those 2 points, and then the second quadratic going downwards through those 2 points. After that, you can answer the question, talking about axis of symmetry, where the x-intercepts are, the maximum and minimum point, and if those are reflections. Okay, here comes the answer. Now, if you were to draw a graph, it looks something like this. And if you look at them, they do have the same axis of symmetry because an imaginary dotted line would go through the middle of both. So that's true. So number 1 is true. Number 2, they do not have the same x-intercepts. Now, depending how you drew it, if you drew it kind of big, you would see it. They do not cross the x-axis at the same points. So number 2 is wrong. Number 3 is right. Graph F, which is the one going down, has the maximum point. G has a minimum point, so that is true. The fourth one, they are not reflections of each other. Now, in order to have a reflection, you would have to draw, think about a piece of paper being folded down the middle, and that is not true. So the right answer in this case is D, because both 1 and 3 were right. Okay, here comes number 18. Give it a read. It's talking about printers, both black and color. Pause it if you do not want to hear hints. This concept comes from day 6 when we talked about what slope and y-intercept means. Okay, here's your first hint. We have 2 different equations in this problem, and you don't have to solve either one of them. So since you don't have to solve either one of them, you don't have to necessarily put them into your y equals key. Now, if you did, no big deal. You can use your y equals key for both of these answers, but because of how the answer choices are reading, you don't really need the y equals key. Alright, so all you have to do in this problem is compare the slopes in both equations that they gave you and the y-intercepts in both equations, and then just read each answer choice. Alright, here comes the answer. The answer is G. The reason why is if you look at the slopes between both the black and color equations, black has negative 33t, which is the slope, and color has negative 30, which is the slope. If you subtract both of those, there's negative 3, or 3 as the difference between both of them. So that means that the black, or the printer that was black, is printing faster than the printer that is color. And the way that can read is G. The printer prints 3 fewer pages per minute in colored ink than black ink. Alright, number 19. We talked about this concept on day 1 and day 12. Here comes your first hint, and this concept is simplifying algebraic expressions and laws of exponents. Alright, here's your first hint. I drew arrows from the 2m that's in front of the parentheses, the first parentheses, to the 3/2 m and to the +1. Then, since there's a second set of parentheses, I drew an arrow from that 3 to the 5/3 m and to the -2. So our first step is to distribute. We know that because anytime we have algebraic expression or equation, we're always going to distribute first. Okay, so in front of the first parentheses, we see 2m times 3/2 m. Now, first off, 2 times 3/2, you can just type that in your calculator and get an answer, and that will be your first answer. But you also need to remember to add your exponents. That's where the rule of laws of exponents come in. Alright, after you do all of that, you need to combine like terms, because there will be some like terms in this. But be careful, they're not all like terms. Alright, so hopefully you can get this answer. Okay, here it comes. So if I multiply 2m times 3/2 m, I'm going to get 3m squared. I know it's m squared because these exponents add together to be squared. Then 2m times 1 is 2m. You're going to add that together with 5m, which is what you get after multiplying 3 times 5/3 m. And those are like terms, so I add them together to be 7m. Now the -6 and the 3m squared just come down, so your answer is C. Alright, here comes number 20. Pause the video if you don't want any hints at all. This concept comes from day 5, when we're writing equations and we're going to have to make a prediction with this question. Okay, here comes your first hint. They made this easy for us at first, and they gave us our 2 points. So we're going to use, since we need an equation, we're going to use stat. So we're going to put this in our y equals key. And then we're going to look at the table when y equals -7. Now, this is not the only way you can do this question, but this is the strategy that I taught my class to handle these questions. Okay, the answer comes in 2 seconds. Now, if you were to use stats, you would type in your points like this. If you were to do stat calc 4, you would see that your equation is 0.4x minus 5. Type that into y equals. Then you're going to pay attention that they want the value of x when y is -7. So you would go to where y is, which is the second column, where it's at -7. Not where x is -7, where y is -7, you see -5. Now, if you were looking at the graph, which is another way to do this question, -7 on the y-axis are right here. So the value of x would be right here, which is -5. But what happens if they didn't give us a graph or a picture of a graph where we could see the answer? That's the reason why I taught my class to use the stat key and type it in y equals, which works every time. But either way, your answer is -5. Okay, 21. So pause the video. This concept is on day 10, where we were translating word questions. There's no math in this question at all. Okay, there's a little bit of math, not much. The only math in this question comes from this hint. It says, which function can be used to find the total area? Well, they're talking about a square surface. So you have to remember how to find area of a square. And since the only thing we're given is the side is x feet, you would have to multiply x times x. So that is the first thing you need to do. Then you need to do this part where it says adds 25 feet to the area. So after you multiply x times x, then you need to do the adds 25 feet to the area. And then just tell me what that means. Okay, the answer comes in 2 seconds. So you should have picked the answer choice D, because x squared plus 25 means you just write it to the side. So the answer is D. Okay, number 22. 22 is talking about exponential decay. So there's very little math in this question. You're going to just have to look at each answer choice and start eliminating answer choices. So this is your first hint. Notice that your graph starts at 12. So pretty much for F and G, you're going to have to start with 12. And then you're going to see which one makes sense. So F says the car lost 1/2 of its value. So if you take 12, then take half of that, then see if it matches up for each of the 3 years. So see if it matches up for that number at 6, and then it matches up for that number, at 3, and then it matches up for that number at 6. And here's what I mean by that. So this is a very big hint. So take half of 12, which is the same thing as dividing by 2 or multiplying by 0.5. Tell me what that number is. See if that's correct at 3. Then take 6 and divide by 2 or multiply by 0.5, and then see if that makes sense at 6. Okay, you could keep going on if you wanted to at 9 and 12. For G, quarter means you divide by 1/4 or multiply by 0.25. So if you take 12, multiply by 0.25, see if that matches up at 3. And then do the same thing when it's 9. So 9 times 0.25, see if that answer matches up at 6. Okay, H. H says that the car lost less value between years 9 and 10. So subtract 9 minus 10, kind of come up with a number for that, and then do the same thing between years 1 and 2. J is its opposite, so the car lost more values. So whatever these numbers were, see if it's true if you flip-flop them around. Okay, so the answer comes in 2 seconds. Alright, you should have picked the answer choice H, and here's kind of the reason why. For F, 12 divided by 2 is 6. That part's true for F. But then you take this 6 and divide it by 2 and it's 3. Well, at 6, you're not at 3. You're more at maybe 4.5, not 3. 3's right here. So that's what makes F false. For G, 1/4, well, 12 times 0.125 is 9. And this isn't hitting at 9. That's like 8.5. 9's right here. Now, 9 minus 10 would maybe be a fourth of a number. And that is definitely a lot less than 1 minus 2, which comes out to be maybe 1.5 of a number, maybe 1 1/4 of a number. Okay, so H is true. Okay, here comes 23. We talked about this concept on day 6, where we had talked a lot about solving for y. Here comes your first hint. Now, this isn't the only way to do this question, but it's probably the easiest, and it's the most common way I taught my class, was to solve each one of these equations for y. Now, once you solve each one of these for y, then see if the slope is 1/4. 1/4 is the same thing as 0.25. And then let's see if it passes through that point. So you could tell if it passes through that point after you solve each one of these for y if you type it into your y equals key and then look at your table. So since you're solving for y, your rectangle on each one of these problems will be -4. And then your triangle on each one of these problems will be 1x. And we can put a 1 in front of x. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Shouldn't take too long because they're pretty much all the same equation. And only one of them is going to work. Here comes the answer. Alright, all of them solved out are here in different colors. So for A, I have -9 plus 0.25x. So the slope matches up, and then when I put it into my y equals key, I see that it does hit at 4, -8, which is what we're trying to hit. None of these other equations hit there, so that means A is the right answer. All right, number 24. We're talking about a spiral notebook and a memo book. Pause the video if you don't want any help. This concept came from day 10. Okay, so here's your first hint. Your first sentence in this problem is an equation. So we got to figure out a way to write it as an equation. So a new spiral notebook contains 30 more sheets of paper than a new memo book. Your second sentence is an entirely different equation. So write it as a different sentence, but use the same variables of S and M. And that's it. It's the only part of this question. No solving in this problem. Here comes the answer. Alright, you should have picked answer choice F. So I know it's a little weird how they wrote the first sentence, but if you think that the spiral notebook has 30 more sheets of papers, a way you could write that as an equation is taking the spiral notebook, subtracting the memo book, and you should have 30 sheets left over. That's one way to write it. Another way to write that equation, by the way, would be S equals 30 plus M. But they didn't write it like that. Okay, number 25. So, number 25 came from day 13, when we spent the majority of that day multiplying binomials. Okay, so here's your first hint. Since they gave us what is our solution to multiplying binomials, what we would want to do is draw a box next to each answer choice and see if we multiply them together, we get what we started with. All right, that is my only hint for this question. So hopefully you know what I'm talking about. You can pause it and work them out. Okay, here comes the answer. All right, if I drew a box for each one of them, my first one, remember, you're multiplying, you're putting 3x minus 1 on the left side of that box, 2x plus 5 on the top, multiply them together and you get 6x squared in the top, then you get 15x minus 2x minus 5. They combine together to be plus 13, not minus 13 like we're wanting. So if you do the same thing with b, my like terms are negative 3x and negative 10x. They combine together to be minus 13, which is what I'm wanting. So b is the answer. Now, if the box isn't the way you did it by FOIL. I also FOILed right here. Because remember, when we did these, we said we can either draw a box or a FOIL. But that's 25. We're only doing 3 more questions. We're going to 28 today. Okay, so we're talking about a baby whale, and we're seeing how much he grows in this question. There is no math in this question either. Pause the video if you don't want to hear any hints. This concept came from day 5, where we talked about the meanings of slope and the y-intercept. Okay, now, even though we're not solving in this problem, we can use this equation by using x for d and put it into our y equals key. And it helps a little bit because it does have some answers, like right here. It says 5 days old, so that would be our x. It should be the answer of 20. Or here it says 18 tons. That's our y in this case. They put it in backwards at 50 days old, so that's our x, 150 days old. Okay, so that was one hint. You would want to use your table. You can check each one of these. Now, at birth, think about what that would mean. How many days old would the whale be? And then this one should be pretty easy. H, see if you're gaining 0.1 tons per day. Okay, here comes your answer. Oh, here's another hint. Make sure you pick the answer that's not true. Okay, so the answer you should have picked is G. So F works out because at 0 it does equal 3. H works out because they are increasing by 0.1 each day. And J works out because when you're at 150 for X, 18 is true. So G is our answer here. Number 27, talking about quadratics. Pause the video if you don't want to hear any hints. This concept came from day 14. Alright, so first off, there's 2 ways to do this question. You could use your y equals key and count up 9 units. I caution you on this one. It's a little tough to see the answer, but it could work, especially if you use your table as well. Or you can just use addition, but to use addition, you got to know what number to add 9 to, because you're supposed to only add 9 to the y-intercept. That's how you move it up or down. All right, here comes the answer. So if I add 9 to the y-intercept of negative 12, I have negative 3. and they're only asking for the value of c, so the value of c is -3. The reason why you might not want to use your y or your graph, the y equals key, is because you can't really see the y-intercept if on your standard zoom 6. If you try to zoom out, you still can't see it because your graph gets too small. But if you were to use a table and look at 0 and then add 9 to this first number at 0, because that's the y-intercept, you would also get -3. All right, number 28, our last question for today. Again, this one's not any math at all. It's just understanding that this equation, what it means. So I'm relating this concept to day 1 where we talked about translating expressions, but really this is one of the ones that doesn't really fit into one of our days because we talked about it a little bit each day. Okay, so here's your hints, really big hints. Your equation that they gave us, they're talking about he spends $7 on a car wash. So if he spends $7 on your car wash, they say they're asking us what does X mean. They also said that we have a membership fee of $85. That is set. That's our y-intercept. So we're just trying to see what does X mean in this equation. Okay, here comes your answer. If you read F, they're talking about the total amount of money. Now, anytime it says total amount of money, that means Y, not X. And we're trying to figure out what X means. G says the number of months that the customer was a member. That's not important to this question at all, and definitely not important to the equation. H is the number of washes, which is exactly what we're talking about, because let's say he only had 2 car washes, then you would say 7 times 2 plus 85 to figure out how much he would pay for that year. For J, that is talking about the cost of each time the customer takes his car to the wash. Well, it says it right here that it's 7, so that's not, doesn't mean X at all. Okay. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you got something out of it. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video where we'll cover 13 more questions of STAAR.